Dave Sobel here at IT Nation Connect. I got the opportunity to sit down with Elliott Hyman. He is the CEO of the Myra Technology Group, which is notably part of the operational end of Evergreen.
Yep.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate you having me on here.
I was really fascinated to talk to you because you're in an interesting position of being kind of a little bit of overseeing operations for a group of disparate MSPs that are also trying to work collectively. That feels like it brings a lot of really interesting challenges, particularly in a market that leans really heavily into standardization, like we constantly are talking about that. Tell me a little bit about your approach and the way you think about that problem.
Yeah, so the way that we think about our businesses is, first we're going out and we're trying to select the best companies in the industry to join there. So we're already getting a great business, or what we believe to be a great business. And I think, over the years we've, developed an ability to identify those pretty well. And then we're saying, hey, we want to take each of these businesses and move them on the continuum of progress for them. And it's not the same for every business. And so what that requires is really different from what others are doing, is going deep into each one of our companies and really understanding who they are, who their employees are, who their customers are, and what's the next step in their progress, and how do we support that.
So how are you balancing that trend of like, well, I've done it over this way, or we've learned it over here, without breaking the thing that made that asset unique? Because one of the things you guys are trying to do is continue to keep that business running strongly, yet at the same time accelerate it and make it better. How are you, is there a process you think about, or a technique or an approach that helps you understand what to change and what not to?
Yeah, there is, and we're actually in the process of more deeply sort of formalizing that and building out more of our content. One of the big initiatives that will be continuing next year is something we call Lyra OS, which is sort of an adaptation, or you could think of it as something similar to service leadership, but designed specifically for Lyra businesses, using what we've learned over the years in operating these companies. And so the vision for Lyra OS is that we will be able to evaluate all of our businesses on, right now it's about 120 different criteria, and give them resources to move them along essentially their operational maturity level for each of those parts of the business. And so that's kind of how we think about it.
Okay. Now, one of the things that I really appreciate about you is you are a former MSP and you're heavily involved with them now. You can potentially even be still one because you're involved in the operation. Give me a little bit about your vision of what sustainable growth means.
Yeah, it's a great question. Sustainable growth is about building healthy companies that serve their employees well and serve their customers well. And for us, that means adding value to those key stakeholders. And so we do that in a lot of different ways. But if we're doing that consistently, then that's going to produce sustainable growth. And we also know what doesn't produce sustainable growth, which is trying to squeeze every dollar of cost out of a business and run it in a way that that isn't for the long-term good of the employees or customers, and we work very, very hard to not do that. And it can be tempting, but we're always balancing the long-term and short-terms in how we operate.
So give me a little, particularly because you're really heavily involved in helping individual MSPs and the ones within the portfolio grow. Tell me how you approach that sort of short-term, long-term knob, right? Because as every business owner knows, I can lean into kind of spending more for growth now, or I can be a little bit more diligent on long-term investments. Give me a little bit of your framework about thinking about how to apply that knob.
Yeah, I mean, it's about building great companies, right? Okay. And so, that's not a simple thing. If it were simple, there'd be more great companies. And so for us, it always starts with talent, making sure that we have the right team on the field to go win. And then we think about, knowledge, and how do we share all the knowledge that we acquire from working with our companies, from understanding our businesses, and moving those best practices across the portfolio. And then we have all the advantages of scale now, as one of the larger platforms in the industry, we have stronger relationships with vendors, and we can make interesting investments that it's very hard for a small local MSP to make, and those things are really powerful when done together.
Okay. Now, I think the words "the benefit of scale," "the power of scale" are doing a lot of heavy lifting there. Give me a little bit of the insight of what you have found have really been the actual tangible benefits of size and scale.
Yeah, so there's a couple. One would be obviously our relationship with vendors and the cumulative purchasing power that we have. In the early years of Evergreen and Lyra, we caught a lot of flack because we weren't standardizing on specific products, and there was a feeling of, well, gosh, you're leaving so much on the table because you could go use a single RMM across the entire platform and probably get that price down, there's value in that. What's happened over the last couple of years is that we've grown to a scale where even having a subset of our companies purchasing from any particular vendor may be one of their largest customers. And so we ended up getting to that place without doing all the disruption of switching out the tech stack and breaking a bunch of stuff along the way. And that's one of the advantages of scale. Another significant advantage of scale is what you can do for people. And so there's countless examples of folks who've been able to progress their career throughout the org, in a way that they couldn't if they're at a 30-person MSP. Because a lot of times, if you're trying to move forward in your career at a smaller business, you might run into someone who's been there longer or is in the role ahead of you, and you're waiting for them to retire, or you can't move up. And so what we facilitated is, hey, if you're ready for that next step and there's not a place in your existing business, we can actually, have you move into another one of our companies, get that career step up, and stay with us. And so that's a big deal for acquiring talent in this industry. When I was, going back to the early days of Evergreen, we were at Wolf Consulting, we were a 30-person business. I saw that in action. I saw that people were getting stuck. And so that's a really big deal for keeping talent and for getting talent in the first place.
I think you're actually really well positioned to give me a perspective on something that I've been really trying to understand. And one of the things that I talked to your colleagues at Evergreen, I've also talked to other investors in the space, and one of the things that they've all been focused on is there's a lot of small MSPs, there's a growing number of large and platform players, and there's actually something of a lack of ones in the middle right now. Is there something that's going on in that middle space? As somebody who's got a lot of experience growing these businesses from smaller to larger, is there something notable about that smaller that mid-sized space that really needs to be a warning sign, or something we need to invest in as an industry or individual owners can do? Tell me a little bit about your perspective on that middle-sized MSP.
Can you define middle for me?
I almost want you to help me there a little bit, because I think we're good at defining small. And I think we're really good at defining the new emerging large. Tell me what popped into your head when I said middle.
Yeah. So there's a subset of our businesses. So, across the portfolio, the average size of the business is a little shy of $1.5 million of EBITDA.
Okay.
Within that group, there's maybe 10 of our businesses that are in the sort of 3 million plus range, 60 to 100 and plus employees, that type of scale. Those, I think what's happening in the industry when you get to that scale, which is sort of that step up from sort of, the larger end of small, which is like that million. I mean, these are not small businesses, but they're, the smaller end of, certainly interesting for us to invest in. I think that the industry has not really, consistently developed how do you maintain your growth rate as you get that big? And because a lot of times you're coming from, founder-centric sales operations, and generally an underinvestment in the sales team. And like the reality is when you get to you just need more people trying to sell if you want to maintain a 10 or 15% growth rate year over year. And that's what we're working on currently for those businesses.
And coded in that, I want to make sure I understand it well, because you're talking about people trying to sell. I think you're talking about more than just sales headcount. I think you're talking about strategy, marketing, messaging, the all of the human resources and efforts that go into bringing in new logos to an MSP. Is that a kind of the way you're thinking about it?
Yeah, it's the scale of the cumulative investment. I do still believe that MSP sales is, hand-to-hand combat. I think you do have to have people out on the field having conversations. Our competitors, we always think about, hey, how can we offer something better than what our local competitors can? And certainly as well, there's the larger competitors, but most of our competitors, our industry is highly fragmented. Most of our competitors are smaller competitors. And so, there's advantages that they have over us, right? But what are the advantages we have, over them, and how do we leverage those to deliver the best possible experience for employees and customers? And so, that's kind of how we think about it. But, I'd also add, it's people first, then it's all the great things that you mentioned. And it's the quality of those people too. And so, we've gotten a lot smarter over the last 7 years on what does, a good sales org in an MSP look like. And that's what we try to build in our businesses.
As I'm getting to my last questions, the one area that I definitely need to have your expertise, give me a little bit of your take on. One of the things I've been hearing a lot about from vendors is this idea of moving toward platform approaches. I've heard it the investor side, but I'm thinking about it kind of on a technology stack position. I'm thinking about the level of that. I'm hearing from you the level of, well, standardization is important, but you're focused on individual MSPs more than across your, say, network of investments. But what I really want to get your sense there is how are you thinking about the investments in MSP platforms, the technology stack themselves, versus kind of a classic integration approach to bring it together? Like, how are you thinking about that tension and where this is going?
It's a great question. I think, I'm probably going to give you a somewhat unsatisfying answer on this.
Then it's real. I appreciate that.
Which is, I don't know that we totally know. I think what we do know is if we build great leadership teams that are individual operating companies and we equip them to evaluate the best solutions for their team and their customers, we'll ultimately be okay.
Okay.
And so, in general, our philosophy has been if we put great decision makers close to employees and close to customers, they're going to take care of a lot of these things, and really doing what you're describing as change management, right? Mm-hmm. The industry is changing, and how do we stay nimble to keep up with that change? And that's the foundation of our philosophy. So, I don't know. Obviously, I've been hearing all the conversations about that, but I don't think, the industry is so large and so fragmented. I don't see massive change coming very fast, and I also don't see consolidation on a single platform being a easy outcome for anyone to achieve.
So I love the way that you think, and you're very deliberate and careful with this. So this is my last question. I'd like to get a little bit of insight into your decision-making framework. You've clearly got an approach. How do you think about making decisions and making sure that they're the right and effective decision?
It's a great question. I think maybe another way to think about it is it's not just making decisions, but it's thinking through, sort of Jeff Bezos has this like one-way door, two-way door. Part of, I think, the reason that we've, our best ideas have been stuff that we just said, let's just try that. Like, let's make a bet, let's see what happens, and we'll adjust as we learn. And so, for me, it's a bias towards action and saying, hey, I can kind of run this thought experiment about what I think the outcome's going to be, but we're going to be a lot better off making the decision of let's try it and then really closely measure our progress against what we thought the outcome would be, and maintain the ability to pivot as is necessary throughout that process. And every good idea that we've had in the business started as probably a half-baked decent idea, and then we just iterated on it over time as we figured out what was working and what wasn't.
So that gives me a ton of insight of the way you think. Elliott, this has been fascinating. Really appreciate you sitting down and chatting with me today.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Dave. Thanks so much.
With as many breaches and security concerns as I report in this show, it should be obvious that cybersecurity is not just about technology, but also the human expertise needed to interpret and respond to complex threats. Huntress is focused on elevating SMBs and MSPs around the world. Huntress has a suite of fully managed cybersecurity solutions powered by a 24/7 human-led SOC, dedicated to continuous monitoring, expert investigation, and rapid response. And the proof is the execution. Huntress is the #1 rated EDR for SMBs on G2. Want to know more about the platform? Visit huntress.com/MSP radio to learn more. The Business of Tech is written and produced by me, Dave Sobel, under ethics guidelines posted at businessof.tech. If you like the content, please make sure to hit that like button and follow or subscribe. It's free and easy, and the best way to support the show and help us grow. You can also check out our Patreon, where you can join the Business of Tech community at patreon.com/MSP radio, or buy our Why Do We Care merch at businessof.tech. Finally, if you're interested in advertising on the show, visit mspradio.com/engage. Once again, thanks for listening to me, and I will talk to you again on our next episode of The Business of Tech.
Part of the MSP Radio Network.